Maps have continued to be a big talking point regarding Dead by Daylight's balance for a long time. I myself have even thrown my hat in the ring on a couple occasions to talk about maps that have become increasingly problematic for one reason or the other. Believe it or not, I hate incredibly survivor-sided maps just as much as I hate incredibly killer-sided maps. I know. Fence Sitter Randy. I try to make it a personal mission of mine to be as objective about most things as I can, but at the same time, I don't mince words either. I say what I think, but also try to be aware of other people's opinions, because I'm so wholesome or something, I guess. I don't know. Regardless, the point is that I want DBD to be as consistently balanced as possible. I don't want either side to have a much larger advantage over the other. I mean, DBD is an asymmetrical game with numerous balance issues that seem to get snuffed out as quickly as they get reignited, so my endeavors feel fruitless a lot of the time. It's a losing battle, but one I do enjoy fighting nonetheless. Anyway, if you ask anyone who's been playing this game for a while, they'll tell you that the game is much better balance-wise than it was in the early years, and if they disagree, they're probably trolling. It's crazy to look back on old DBD footage and keep in mind that the game managed to survive for so long. It's like a cockroach that just never stays dead or never died to begin with. If you take a look at some of the old maps, for example, you'll be shocked to see just how much less offensive they are now than they were before. A lot of super safe maps have been dialed down, and some maps that were notoriously dead in terms of palettes and windows have gotten a second look. And some maps, well, they don't get the attention they really need. Regardless, I'd say behavior has gotten much more consistent when it comes to designing maps. They've released some real bangers lately, with Ormond Lake Mine and Dead Sands both being pretty damn fun in my opinion. But that being said, they don't get it right all the time. While they're much better, they aren't perfect, and far from it. Sometimes that imperfection bleeds into a variety of things surrounding it. In fact, there's one specific imperfection in Behavior's map design that overtook the entire map it was featured on and makes it a miserable experience for a multitude of different reasons. Today, we're taking a look at the Dungeons & Dragons map, Forgotten Ruins, and how it's just a horrible mess of map design. But first, folks, a quick shout out to No Name, who recommended talking about this exact map a couple months ago. So everybody say thank you to No Name. I hope one day you get a name. You deserve it. As some of you guys may know, if you want me to talk about a specific topic, leave it in the comment section below on this video or any other video, and I'll look through them and maybe I'll pick out yours. I'm always looking for new video ideas, so if I like your idea, I'll let everybody know it was yours. That's the honor code we're going by here. So if you're interested, make sure to leave a comment. Anyway, let's get started. The Dungeons & Dragons chapter was one I wasn't exactly hyped about, but I immediately fell in love with when it actually dropped. Both the Survivor and the Killer are a ton of fun, and I even made a video recently talking about Vecna if you care to see that, who's quickly become my favorite killer in the game for a variety of different reasons. However, this video isn't talking about Vecna, I already went down that road. Instead, this video is unpacking the one thing that came with the D&D chapter that I wasn't really a fan of when it dropped, and that happens to be the map Forgotten Ruins. Well, one of the only things I don't like about this chapter. Weave attunement. But what is it about this map that makes it such a problem? Why do people hate playing on it? And most importantly, why is it considered one of the deadliest maps that survivors can get right now? The first problem I really want to unpack surrounds the map size, because it's by far the biggest issue at a first glance. Map size is incredibly important because it sort of bridges the gap between the strongest killers and the weakest killers. Killers like Trapper and Myers tend to have a better shot at winning on smaller maps because they aren't relying on traversal powers that most killers come with these days. And the ones that do aren't at a much larger advantage because they don't need them nearly as much. That being said, for those that have gotten Forgotten Ruins and spent a while playing on it, you can immediately tell that the map is incredibly small, at only 92 square tiles, which is kind of the unit of measurement they use for Dead by Daylight maps. To put it into perspective, Cold Tower, the map that tends to be looked at as the gold standard for DBD map balance, is around 132 square tiles. The largest maps in the game, Shelter Woods and Azerov's Resting Place, happen to be 176 square tiles. However, that 92 square tiles isn't exactly a flat amount, as the map has a dungeon underneath that sits at around 40 square tiles of extra space. If you take those two numbers and combine them, it comes out to 132, so technically it's the same size as Coal Tower. I know I just threw a whole lot of numbers at you, I'm sorry. All you need to know is that the actual map feels pretty small. While that additional space underneath the map might make it sound like you'd barely even notice how small the map really is, you definitely will, and that's for a couple of reasons we'll get into later. Because this double-stacked map philosophy creates a lot of problems, and we're barely scratching the surface here. Typically, smaller maps tend to be a bit bulkier when it comes to resources. Pallets spawn closer together in order to offset the leg up that killers get due to how much less they have to travel to get from point A to point B. Point A being the meg they just hooked, and point B being the generator that was at 70% progress. When they don't make up for the size with resources though, the maps all of a sudden become miserable for the survivors, which is exactly what we end up seeing on maps like Haddonfield, and we also end up seeing here. If you take a look at the upper level on this map, you'll find that for the most part, it's very dead. Shack is about the only tile that you can consider to be consistently reliable. You have 2 other jungle gyms that can spawn, but their strength is as RNG dependent as the chance of my dad coming back with the milk is, where you just might get absolute garbage and nothing might happen. The rest of the dead area is covered with the odd junk loop here or there, but against a good amount of killers, they can be a death sentence a lot of the time. If you run it perfectly, you may get a bit of time to waste, but more often than not, you won't be surviving for very long at these sorts of tiles. Against killers with any sort of ranged attack, or to be honest, any killer who knows how to play a 50-50, you won't be extending a chase for much longer. You may get 1 or like 2 decent setups, but that's very RNG dependent, and you could just as easily get fuck all. So if the upper level of this map isn't very strong, the lower level probably is, right? Well, unfortunately, pretty much every pallet in the dungeon is cheeks, with the only amount of strength being the windows, which can be kind of annoying to phase as a killer, assuming you start a chase with them at the wrong angle or when the survivor has too much distance. That can suck, but once you get the positioning you want, they're hardly problematic. This leaves the total safety on this map being almost nothing. Other than Shack, there's nowhere you can really run that you know you'll be able to extend a chase for a good amount of time. If you're a pretty solid player, you can make some things work, but it's hard to feel like you have anything to typically rely on. However, there is a single design aspect on this map that can make it really frustrating for the killers, and if you know what it is, don't worry, I'll get into that in just a bit. But first, I want to spend some time complaining about how this map is actually structured and designed. Forgotten Ruins is notorious for just having the worst layout. I've talked about this a couple times now, where behavior just doesn't seem to be able to make maps with a more vertical layout work. It's very clear that some killer powers weren't designed with that sort of gameplay in mind. Specifically killers like Sadako, Nurse, or Pinhead, who all have problems with this kind of map setup. Sadako, for example, can be extremely frustrating to play against on this map because you can get condemned through floors. And Nurse and Pinhead both use the same power logic and have mental breakdowns while trying to teleport or summon a chain, at least in some specific locations. If you've ever played either of these killers on a double stacked map, I'm sure you've noticed just how finicky their power usage can be. This problem transitions over to things like certain perks which activate in a defined radius. Because they move through floors, they can be extremely aggravating. We talked about this when I made my video about boon perks, where behavior doesn't exactly seem to know what a sphere is. Instead, most things work like a cylinder, where they have infinite range up and down, or at least big enough range where they might as well be infinite. With perks that activate within a certain range of the killer or activate through a killer's tear radius, they can put pressure on the survivors who are technically not close to the killer but are instead through the floor. This is why I don't really buy the claim that because there's a floor stacked on top of the other, technically the map is bigger than what the actual measurements show, like we see with Gideon or Midwich. Because so many perks and even some killer powers don't give a shit about that floor setup, it really doesn't feel like the map is bigger than it is. It just feels like the killer is constantly up your ass all match. Some killers do feel that extra space, but there are some that just don't, especially if they have the right build for the map. Considering that now some killers have a tear radius that covers 40 meters, on a map like Forgotten Ruins, which is very small, they might be covering like 85% of the map with their tear radius at all times. And if you take perks that work within the tear radius, you might start seeing how this causes a lot of problems. I respect behavior for taking a chance and trying to make different types of maps with unique layouts, but they clearly have a lot of issues here and there, and most things in the game aren't designed with that in mind. Maybe some years down the line where behavior starts designing perks and powers with different types of map structures in mind, things will be better, but right now it just makes matches so frustrating for a variety of different reasons. However, I think behavior believed their new idea that they had for this map would fix a lot of the problems that this structure creates. But trust me, it didn't. You don't know what I'm talking about? Well, what separates this map from the many others is that behaviors seem to hinge their entire design philosophy on these passages that appear in 3 spots around the map. These passages or portals or whatever the hell you want to call them allow the survivors and the killer to move to the connected portal around the map. But they are only one way, so you can't use it to go back and forth. Anyway, there's only one on the upper level of the map, and it's placed on the back of the main tower. In the dungeon though, there's 2. There's one in the torture room area, and then there's one in Vecna's weird beautiful stargazer office thing, and it leads to an area that sits right to the back of the tower, so like you know, you can easily access that other portal. This will be important later. We're gonna talk about this. Well, there are only 3 of these portals. They're a lot more problematic than you'd think, and I don't even know where to really start. These passages are what Forgotten Ruins balance hinges on, and to be honest, they don't really do the map any justice. As I said before, I respect behavior for trying something so bold and new with these portals, but they just don't feel very good with how they function with the rest of the map, or just in general. They're not like actual like instantaneous portals. You have to walk through them for a bit, and then there's like an animation of coming out of them, so they just feel like weird in terms of momentum, and I'm not a big fan of it. And because they don't feel very good, the map doesn't either, and there's already other problems we've talked about with this map, so it just adds on to a pile of things that I don't like. Anyway, we've already talked about how dead the map is in terms of strength and resources, which would definitely lead to problems all on their own, but the portals just double down on these aspects and make the map so much more terrible. For example, these portals really mess with some killer powers. For some reason that's beyond me, the Knight's Guards have an aneurysm if a survivor enters a portal while being chased and just decide to disappear completely. They get like Thanos snapped and they're just gone. You wanna know something else? Victor just straight up can't enter through them, so if the survivors use the portal while Victor's chasing them, they might as well be in fucking Narnia because Victor isn't catching up. I know nobody plays twins, but it's still really annoying for the people that do, I imagine. You also have the additional problem where survivors can be grabbed off the portals even when healthy, so if they run to the portal while the killer is right behind them, it just leads to an awkward moment where one role is waiting for the other just to do something, anything. And then you have the issues that arise when these portals are used for looping. If you're playing a survivor and have enough distance, you can consistently use the portal in Vecna's office or, you know, whatever, teleport to the area near the back of the tower and keep chaining the portals together, which gets incredibly frustrating for the killer and is aggressively boring for the survivor. It's rare that people do this from what I've seen, my personal experience, but when it happens, it's so annoying. And I just have to ask, why? These portals cause so many problems, and I just don't understand why they're even on this map at all. I get that they wanted the dungeon to be accessible from different locations, as otherwise you'd only have one way to get up or down, being the stairway in the tower, but that's a solution to the problem that they created by designing the map like this. Sorry, I'm getting a little too passionate. I have to calm down. If the portals were just able to be walked through like anything else, a la Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, that would fix a lot of the issues because chases would naturally flow through them, and a lot of the issues that come with killers' powers not working with them would be solved. I guess the technology just isn't there for behavior yet. Plus, you have the issue where sometimes you'll see a survivor right in front of you and they're already too far in the animation to get hit, so you just end up smacking the wall and feel like a complete dumbass. I don't get it. These portals lead to a lot of problems, and the fact that the map is designed with them in mind and centers the balance around them just makes this issue a whole lot worse, and I just wish it was designed like every other map in the game and they didn't hinge the entire design of this map on the portals, which just don't feel very good, you know? And then we have the cherry on top, the icing on the cake, the final hurrah of this map that you wouldn't think things could get any worse, but it can. It always can. I've learned it always can get worse. So the last thing I want to touch on regarding this map is how awful the exit gate spawns are. They're always consistent and are both visible from pretty much anywhere on the map. This means if the hatch is closed, the survivor has almost no chance of escaping if they're the last one alive, and even further with that, if you're going against a killer who can lock down exit gates really well, like Singularity for example, the end game can be just as frustrating as the rest of the match can be. Again, I just have to ask, why? Why was this map designed with the exit gates in the same spot every match? It just baffles me from every single angle. It's a choice I can't wrap my head around. As much as behavior loves talking about, oh, we need that RNG to keep games interesting, we need RNG for this, we need RNG for that, we need RNG for the players. You keep this? Why? It's one of the only maps in the game that does it. In case I haven't made it super clear at this point, I really don't like this map. There are just so many choices here that I don't understand, and while I appreciate the boldness of some of the choices here, they cause so many problems and leave me with so many questions. Everything from the map size to the layout to the double floor setup to everything else just makes it feel like shit to play on, and it's no wonder why it has such a high kill rate with the numerous problems it has. And any decently strong killer is gonna have no problem at all securing a dub here. That's not to say you'll win every match, but as a killer, there's a lot stacked in your favor that can make it really hard to lose, especially if you choose not to play nice and really take advantage of like a dungeon hook or something. Survivors are on a fucking lifeline when they get this map. They need all the help they can get. It's awful. Again, I just have to wonder why it was designed this way. Was it a proof of concept sort of thing? Was it like a new test for a system of map traversal? Was it a way to make sure survivor mains want to DC the second they load in? I don't know, but it definitely accomplished one of those things. I get that some of you may like this map, but that's completely fine, but I can't help but see all the problems I know would be solved if the map had just been a normal map, without all the extra baggage it has with it. But as always, what do you guys think? Do you like this map? Do you hate this map? Let me know. I'm always curious what you guys think. Personally, for me, I wish this map was fucking gone. I hate this one. But as for right now, that's it for me, gamers. Have a great day.